one of the big questions that I had on the beginning of my journey was realizing that hormonal birth control was really messing with my body. When I would go to the doctors, they were trying to just put me on different birth control. And I just got to a point where I was like, I'm going to get off. But then I found that I really had no support in figuring out what the heck to do after that. And so if someone was trying to consider getting off birth control, what would be some suggestions for their journey on that?
Well, I'm curious first, like, what were the symptoms that you were experiencing that were coming up for you that you were noticing?
Life was just overwhelming. This was right around the time we found out we had mold in our house, so I was detoxing my whole body. There was a lot of things, a lot of reasons why I was getting off, and it was the time where I was also looking into household products that were probably disrupting my hormones as well. So I was just in a full, like, let's reset, let's detox, let's get all this crap out of my body. No matter what I was eating, I was holding on weight, I was sluggish, I had rashes. Ultimately, I feel like the biggest thing was my immune system was in horrible shape. That was one of the biggest ones, and I just could not feel and stay healthy. I just felt like I was in like an angry place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like there's a lot of different side effects that people could be experiencing on birth control. A lot of times it's like you're saying passed off when, in their medical doctor's office. And it's kind of like, oh, I'm experiencing this. Oh, so let's try a different birth control. And so you're passed between the different hormonal birth controls. They're like, oh, well, maybe you can do the non-hormonal copper IUD or something like that. Like there's options that are there within that framework, but they're still limited to these kind of like forms of birth control that are outside of you versus inside of you, and have you actually cultivating your own relationship with your cycle. So one of the things that's interesting is that I would never say to somebody, you should get off birth control. I would never say that to somebody. There's no reason for me to say that. I think a person has their own journey, and for some people, it's perfectly appropriate for them. They feel very comfortable. They feel safe. They feel like, their body is fine. They're not experiencing side effects or any that they are experiencing. Weight gain is a huge one that's very, very common. But yeah, mood swings, different kinds of depression can be a significant one for people. There's some people that it's just the hormones just really mess with their body and it just doesn't work out for them. And there's also risks, associated with hormonal birth control. There are longer term risks. I encourage anybody who's on it or considering it to just look into that, because I feel like those are glossed over as well. It's not the worst thing in the world for a person to be on hormonal birth control. It's something that it is the appropriate choice for some people, for sure. And for a lot of people who don't have like the resources or the ability, the time in their life to like bring in a new practice, it can be just kind of this like easier insurance can pay for it. It can just be like something that you don't have to think about. A lot of people have really busy lives and don't have the time. But for people who are feeling curious, interested in coming off their hormonal birth control or birth control, whatever they're on, there are a lot of things to consider. So I don't feel like I can get into everything, but for the most part, someone coming off of birth control, it's not like a life-saving drug or something. It's like, you can come off of birth control. It's great to talk to your doctor about it. It's your choice and how you want to do it. You can come off birth control, and generally, almost everyone within 6 months will start cycling normally again. Definitely within a year, almost everyone will. That is not true for every single person. Some people end up realizing, oh, I have this underlying thing going on. That's another thing, is that some people were put on birth control because they have some kind of condition, and it might have been something like PCOS, or it might have been something like hormonal acne that was really intense, or it might have been endometriosis or really intense menstrual cramps and pain, pelvic pain. So there's different reasons that, not everybody's just using it for contraception, actually. In fact, I would say there's definitely a lot of people using it for contraception, but at least equal the amount, if not more, who, they go to their gynecologist or just their PCP and they're given it for, some hormonal issue. Fortunately, one of the things that is happening right now is that more and more people are realizing and learning, and it's kind of trending. The information is trending that, oh, just because I'm on hormonal birth control doesn't mean I'm actually healing my body. It's not healing those underlying conditions. It's essentially masking those symptoms. So for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I'm fine. Like, I'm good. I don't have that menstrual pain anymore. Or, oh, like, yeah, I've got these periods because I have my bleeds. When I stop taking my pills, I bleed. Or they're not bleeding ever, because some people have that kind of birth control. There's all different kinds. But then they come off of it. And maybe it's because they're trying to conceive. A lot of times that's what will happen is somebody is like thinking about conceiving. They're like, they've been on birth control for 10, 15, 20 years even. And then they come off and then they start to realize, oh, I actually am noticing that I have these same symptoms I did as a teenager. teenager as I did in my early 20s. So that could be the really intense menstrual cramps or that intense, second half of their cycle potentially, which is oriented a little bit more towards endometriosis. But then there could be like major hormonal mood swings or challenges. Yeah, just mental state or irregular cycles is a huge one. That is a huge thing that comes out, that a lot of people realize, oh, that wasn't just my teens, like that's still happening. I guess I'm just talking about all these ways that hormonal birth control is used, but also once you start to learn, like once you do come off of the birth control and you start to learn, oh, there's these underlying things going on, then it's like, what do you do? And a lot of times if you go to your gynecologist or your doctor, their answer is, well, pretty much you have to go back on control. That's kind of like the main answer, unfortunately. Thankfully, there's lots of people out in the world right now who are like looking at other integrative and holistic and natural solutions to things. It's an interesting conundrum. I feel like there's so much that could be said in this. If someone's coming off, generally it's going to be an easeful process. Generally, they're going to come off, they're going to start cycling at some point within the first 6 to 12 months, often before that, and they can start to pay attention to their cycle. That first step, I can talk about in a minute, but for those folks who don't, they can find support. I will just give the shout out to many people in the world who are supporting people who have irregular cycles, who have menstrual challenges, who have hormonal imbalances. Like there are a lot of different options that are not given to us in our conventional medical system that are available.
And they're on your podcast, right?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of stuff on my podcast. Yeah. I'm happy to share resources if there's more specific things that people have, challenges with or, referrals to people who have more specific practices clinically. I think another thing I wanted to say is like when you're coming off hormonal birth control in general, yes, there are some things you can do to support yourself. I think vitamin D is a big one. Vitamin D and B vitamins are both really, really helpful coming off birth control. I can't remember. There's like something about when you're coming off hormonal birth control. It's really interesting that your D actually decreases. Why does that happen? I don't know, but it's a thing. So supplementing at that time is probably a good idea. And then I always love to support liver function just to help the body, just moving the hormones out of the body, shifting and changing. There's a lot of adjusting that's happening. So liver support could look like nutrition. That could look like eating lots of leafy green vegetables that are brassicas, which is your kale, collards, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, all of those kinds of vegetables, I would say, and or adding in beautiful herbs to support your liver. Some of my favorites there are Schizandra. I love Schizandra so much. Milk thistle, everybody kind of knows about as a liver support, and dandelion. Dandelion root. We've talked about dandelion before, but it's like, it's like one of those common weeds that almost everybody knows. And it's like such a powerhouse hormonal support for us.
Would you make a tea with the dandelion root, or what would you do with it if you were a beginner at using it?
I would work with a person to figure out what would work for them. If they're not going to make a tea, then using a powder and adding that into a smoothie is probably an easier way, or just doing capsules is an option. I don't love capsules personally. I just feel like you never really know how long they're on the shelf. It's not always like the best because once a herb is powdered, it kind of like goes bad more quickly. So you just want to like either powder it yourself, which you can do in like a coffee grinder type of thing, not with your coffee, not your coffee grinder, but like a separate coffee grinder that you have for herbs and seeds and stuff like that, grinding it yourself. And you can add that even into like oatmeal or something. Like you just add it into things, soups, stews, like whatever you want to, yogurt even, just to get it in. So that's one way that's probably a little easier for some folks. But if people were inclined to make a tea with dandelion, yes, there are different ways that you can do that. The best way to get the most medicinal benefit would be to use the root that you kind of like buy in bulk. You buy the cut and sifted root, and then to make an actual decoction with it. So a decoction is a simmered tea, and it's essentially you're decocting it for probably around 15 minutes, bringing it to a simmer and then just simmering it for 15 minutes and then straining it and drinking that. So in my mind, I would also add in some other herbs depending on what somebody was going through or just to make it taste better. So like ginger could be nice there, or like other herbs that people like that are roots or seeds. You could add into that.
Well, I love all that. I mean, I will touch on the reason I was on birth control was because of my cycles were always inconsistent. They would last like 10 days. They were super heavy. And so there was definitely a way in my life where it supported me. Looking back, how I supported myself nutritionally was probably one of the biggest reasons why my cycle was so bad. Like you were saying, yes, my birth control definitely masked it. And then when I came off, I was relearning how to support my body in a healthy way. Welcome to Floaductivity, the channel that guides you on a transformative journey towards spiritual wisdom, self-development, and healing practices, all aimed at elevating your intuition and aligning you with your soul's purpose. I'm your host, Kara Dempsey, and I'm thrilled to have you joining me as we learn together. Please subscribe and share this with a friend to help grow my channel. I appreciate you, and we'll chat soon.